Hi guys, this is Hero, and as you can probably tell, I'm not in my usual setup, okay? I'm in my cousin's basement in Chicago. I'm out of town. But as I was traveling, I remember this very important thing was happening, okay? So I had to make a video on it, and that is the spring equinox of 2022, okay? Now, what is the spring equinox? Well, the spring equinox is when the sun moves into Aries in the Western astrology system, okay? Now, as you guys know, I make videos, if it's on astrology, in the Indian or Vedic system mostly, right? But I do have some knowledge of the Western tropical system, as that's, you know, the system that I kind of grew up learning first before I realized the value of the Vedic system. And in the West, sun, it's the most important planet, okay? And when sun goes into Aries, where it gets exalted, that's its most important transit. East or west, the sun, when it goes into Aries, that's its most important transit, okay, for the sun. So I decided, you know what, since I know a little about the Western system, and you know, the Western system is what a large part of the world values most, and since this is the most important transit, I'm like, man, I gotta make a video on this, okay? So now, as you guys can probably tell from my Vedic versus Western astrology video, in my opinion, the Western system kind of represents what's happening more at the surface, okay? And the Vedic system, or the sidereal belt, kind of represents what's happening more at a spiritual level, okay? And for more information on my, you know, my views on this, you can just type in that, like, Western versus Vedic astrology in my channel name, or any one of those terms in my channel name, and you'll probably find that video, okay? But now, so sun represents what? Sun represents the ego or the identity, right? Which is kind of why it's most important to the Western system, because the Western system kind of values what's happening more on the surface, okay? So when the sun goes into Aries in the Western system, you could say that the changes will be happening more for the ego on the surface level, right? And then when the sun goes into Aries in the sidereal belt or on the Vedic system, you could say the ego is undercurring more changes at a spiritual level, right? And I'm gonna make a separate video, obviously, on sun in Aries when it goes into, when sun goes into Aries on the sidereal belt, right? In the Vedic system, because it's too important not to make a video on that, as that's the system I, you know, follow more. But what does this mean? So have you ever had a situation in your life or someone else's life or something, when something occurs, like let's just say some kind of problem or some kind of change occurs on the surface, but it takes a little while for those changes to kind of sink in your lifestyle to change, right? So that's kind of what's going on here. So when the sun goes into Aries, the spring equinox, the changes are occurring. But in my opinion, at least, on a ego level, the changes don't really fully sink in, and, you know, the ego starts kind of spiritually adjusting until the sun goes into Aries on the sidereal belt, okay? Now, one thing to notice here is that, you know, it's not just like tropical versus the Western system, right? There's all kinds of systems out there that value the beginning of the cycle at different points in time, right? So for example, if you look at Burmese astrology, it also follows the sidereal belt, which the Vedic system or the Indians also follow as well. But if you look, the Ashwini Nakshatra, right, which in the Vedic system starts right at the beginning of Aries, they have Ashwini starting at the last 10 degrees of Pisces, okay? So what does this mean? Okay, yeah, at a sign level, the Burmese say that, Aries starts at, a certain point on a sidereal belt that we follow with the Indians. But at a nakshatra level, they sense that, and I said the nakshatra system and the sign system, they're independent, but they kind of work together. So at a nakshatra level, Ashwini, which is kind of the first nakshatra in Aries, starts at 10 degrees, the last 10 degrees of Pisces, right? So they kind of say that, okay, there's some level of changes that start when a planet is at the end of Pisces sign-wise, okay? Now, why am I saying this? Well, when the sun is in Aries in the Western system, when it first gets into Aries, in the Eastern system, it's in Pisces. So, which in the Burmese system, after some time, it's gonna start to slowly enter Ashwini Nakshatra, okay? So what this is saying is that, yeah, even in the Vedic system, if, sun is in Pisces still, there is still some level of superficial changes that are starting now, and that, for the spiritual changes to fully kick in, yeah, that'll start when sun goes into Aries in the Vedic system, right? But the spring equinox, when this starts, when sun goes into Aries in the Western system, there is still some level of superficial changes that will occur, okay? And how we can use this to our advantage is that start taking note of these changes that start, okay? Or any changes that you feel, because the ego, yeah, sure, I said the term superficial, so you might think things that are happening, but, like I said, spiritually, we are not our thoughts and we are not our emotions, okay? The ego, superficially, also represents, your thoughts and emotions, right? Because, thoughts and emotions could be considered as superficial, okay? They are not us. They are not, what the soul, we are, the pure soul conscious energy. We are not our thoughts and emotions. So don't just think, just because I say superficially, that I'm purely talking about things that are happening on the outside. It could be also things that are happening superficially on the inside, like thoughts and emotions. So when sun goes into Aries in the Western system, or the spring equinox starts, start thinking, okay, what's going on? What are the changes that are happening, right? Because if we're more aware of this stuff that's happening now, when sun goes into Aries, we're able to make the changes. And sun is in Pisces right now, right? In the Vedic system. So when the spring equinox happens in the Vedic system, sun gets into Pisces. So it's like, okay, at a spiritual level, when sun goes into Aries, yeah, all these superficial changes are happening for the ego. So deep down spiritually, we can see, okay, what's kind of the patterns that we need to let go of. We're being exposed to all this new stuff superficially, either externally or internally superficially. This is kind of the stuff that we need to let go of deep down. And then because, hopefully if we've done the work, when the sun goes into Aries in the Vedic or the sidereal belt, we can slowly start to, make the changes spiritually for the ego, okay? And I would strongly encourage you, I mentioned a lot in this video about the Burmese system. Look, in the sidereal system, I believe, in the Burmese system, Ashwini starts at the last 10 degrees of Pisces, okay? So basically, when it gets to Revati Pada 2, for those of my Vedic astrology followers, okay? So I'd encourage you, when sun gets into Revati Pada 2, see if you notice a little bit of an extra, at a nakshatra level, I'm not an expert by any means in, the Burmese system, but I'm gonna, I'm kind of trying to learn a little bit more about that system also intuitively, because I said there's a value in all systems. Try to see, okay, what kind of, changes that have been occurring here because of this. Like I said, the Burmese, they have the same signs as, the Vedic astrology system does, but the nakshatras are a little bit off, okay? So try to see when, sun gets into Revati Pada 2 on the Indian system, what happens. And also, and like I said, that is going to occur more at a nakshatra level, okay? So you kind of have to be a little bit more familiar about the energies of the nakshatras there, okay? But like I said, for the spring equinox, just see what's happening on the surface. The surface level for most of us has a lot to do with the, I could say the